Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We had our quiz. Now we can start. This is the fourth session. The real reason why we didn't have this quiz last week was simply that the printer, my printer in my office wasn't there, and the copier next to my the copier that is in the adjunct faculty place was not working either. But I couldn't print it. I have to print it, right? You have to print it someplace. And the what do you call it? The Pamela's off. Pamela was not in her office in the first floor, and the Usos person, the door was locked. So it was like screaming like, "What the fuck is And of course, the library's printer is not the best printer. You notice that? The library used to have two printers. They decided to kind of minimize the situation and only have like one printer on the computer and then a table there. Like, okay, whatever. So I was postponed a week. That means next week will be week quiz that will probably cover material not only of today but a little bit from last week as well. So it's going to be the quiz will always be of the previous week or maybe some information from the earlier week, but no more. Okay, it's not going to be of the given week that the quiz is. The quiz is always retroactive, not proactive in that sense. There should be around, technically, there's up to 10 quizzes, 10 maybe, or maybe 9 only, depends how I work it out with the numbers. The base points are always based on the score number of the percentage of the course. So I try to get a base score of 100. So, and I also tend to give some bonus points so that people can get over the 100 if they need to. Yes?
So next week we have quiz based on today's lecture?
Today and a little bit from something from last week as well. The state. It was on, this is not about, the material you had here was basically the first 2 weeks. The quiz that you had today was basically the first 2 weeks. Okay, with maybe a little bit from week 3, but that little bit of taste of week 3 was also given at the end of week 2. It should have been. So what happened was, why I postponed it was twofold. One was when I had the class week 2, I didn't get to that little teeny taste of the political community yet. So I decided 2 things. I couldn't get my printing done ahead of time, which I always like to do. And then the second thing was, well, okay, I really didn't get as far as I thought I would, okay, in terms of what I was going to cover. So that's why next week will be it'll focus on the state, okay, the aspect of the state. And like for that issue, I would like to get to some things that just kind of go back on the slide from last week. Looked at famous Weber's 3 things from the first week, little bit from the first week, which we talked about Weber's famous classical things of authority. We talked in the first week. Remember that we talked about Weber's 3 classic definitions of leadership. Oh, it's cannot do this to me now. I don't want to do this, but okay, yeah. Make it smaller so at least I can get in here. That of customary tradition, customary, rationality, charismatic. Now this is very important. This is his typology of explaining the forms of political authority. Okay, how is political authority understood in terms of its claim? Okay, Weber's classic model in this sense. Now, part of me wants to also mean if I was going to be a little more drastic and more postmodern, I would probably bring Alexander Kozhev's little book on authority, his little teeny book, A Note on Authority, which he wrote in 1943, and it's written while he was kind of commenting on the Vichy government. Kozhev is rather famous for being one of the principal theoricians of the EU, and that he was the principal minister of advising to the Charles de Gaulle's during the negotiations in the EU. He's considered like the philosopher yeah, he was one of the most important thinkers of this. He was a very weird thinker in terms of he was influenced by Heidegger. He shaped people like his lecture in 1936 on Hegel's phenomenology of mind was so important that it became the defining moment of all these thinkers, like young thinkers like Saussure, Merleau-Ponty, Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, even the young Foucault would be influenced, and also Derrida will be greatly influenced by Alexander Kojève's as a thinker. Kojève was kind of this idea of this Hegelian or radical Hegelian, which understood all this, the end of history and the philosophy of the state. And his book, his note on authority is very important because he comes up with his own typology of authority, which is completely different than this. And I only mention this because I'm using Weber here because Weber was probably the thing that most people who study the social sciences and sociology would point to. Okay, this is the classic typology of authority, and it is a very powerful understanding of authority in the senses. One that is not only rationalistic, but it's also understands the irrational, the concept of charisma in that sense, right? And I would argue charisma will be Weber's conception of charisma will play a very important role with later 20th century thinkers, political scientists thinking about soft power. Like someone like Joseph Nye, who comes up with the concept of soft power, right? What is soft power is really charisma. It is basically attraction, that people are attracted to other countries. They're attracted to a country and they like it. Therefore they will do things in order to please them or help them or in other words, soft power is the ability to get others to do what you want, right? Remember, that's what power is all about. Power is the ability to get what you want. Okay? And there's many mechanisms. Hard power is the use of getting what you want through carrots and sticks, incentives and violence and threats. Okay, carrots and sticks, the metaphor. Whereas soft power is like it is the ability to get other people to do it because they want to do good for you. In other words, it's some people would say it's care, love, care, attraction. That's why charisma, what Weber talks about charisma, is very important to this. Now, another thing I want to remind about this was Weber's notion of the state, and I use this in the lecture. I use this note. Weber in his he dies right during the influenza hit after World War I. Germany, Munich, dies in Munich. He's a German. Now, calling him a sociologist is problematic because although he was we consider him a sociologist. But he saw himself originally as an economist, but also a student of legal theory. And the chair he held in Munich at the time was the chair of politics, the political science chair, or Stadtler, state theory. Okay, the state that of state theory. So, in fact, his last book's on economy and society, right? The last book he wrote, which is one of the principal chapters, we took some of this from material about this, the discussion of what we talked about, the three functions of authority. That I took it primarily from the forms of rule section in Economy and Society, but it's also found in his famous 1919 lecture, the second lecture, Munich lecture, the Vocation as Politics lecture. Okay. Now, what's so important about Weber is Weber's definition of state. Because Weber will be the first person to define it in a very specific way, in that, in fact, this is the way it's commonly will be considered the formal definition of the modern state. We talked about it, right? That is, and therefore this is what he talks about, like the idea. I'll give you the quote here. This is this is the famous thing you should remember, his definition. In that his lecture of Politics Vocation, 1918, he defines the state as what? The human community that successfully is there, that claims the monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force. Remember that word in German is Gewalt, which means coercion, violence, physical force within a given territory. That is directly from his politics vocation. We talked about it a little bit last week when we read that section from the lecture, his lecture, the politics of politics as a vocation, as a calling. The word vocation, like a priest has a vocation, politics as a calling. His two famous Munich lectures was science as a vocation, and then politics as a vocation, okay, as a call, a calling. And in that he gives his definition, this famous definition of this. So why I'm talking about this is because this is where the concepts of sovereignty merges in here. That's the ability to carry out actions independently of internal, external challengers. In other words, it is the sovereignty is always the concept of the actor, the acting power, the power that has the entity that has the thing or being that has the power to act. This is what sovereignty means. Now, the problem that the concept of sovereignty itself is a big, big thing. I mean, we could have a whole course on the concept of what the sovereignty means, its origins and its concepts, because this is a concept that is very nuanced and has a very deep history, both in theology, differences in theology, difference in the conceptualization. The term itself is really coined by the French political jurist and political thinker Jean Bodin around the time of the 16th century, 17th century, 1630, 16. I don't remember the exact date. It's going to bother me. I'll remember it when I see it. But Bodin's famous line was his attempt to kind of coin this, because the word comes from the sovereign. The sovereign is one who rules. It is a sovereignty is the action of the ruler. Okay. Now, Carl Schmitt, in his famous 1920s essay, the first essay of his political theology, where he talks about what is sovereignty. Sovereignty is he who decides, the one who makes the decision, the one who gets to have the right to make the authority in that sense. And the he there, in the German, is not only meaning one person, it can mean plural. So it can be whoever they ruler, who is the ruler, be it a one, a plurality, or a many, right? A one, few, many. It's the one who has the ultimate decision. Now, thus the state is thus the institution that yields force to ensure order within and results this. This brings us back to, this does bring us back to something that was talked about. I should call it. I'm sorry. I should have left book. I was going to leave my 3 up there, but I kind of said I don't need 3. I have 3 already. See, that's what I hate about. Sometimes I thought I didn't have it. Back to this distinction of this, right? The idea of the modern state is that it's a conceptual. It is a construct of the human agency, wholly a construct of human agency. It is the first human instrument. In the modern view, the state is the first tool. It is the first man-made tool, and what this tool does, it creates an order to make order, to escape nature. It is the first, in fact, this is what Hobbes will say in his Leviathan, his book, the classic Leviathan, that the state is that moment, the creation of the state, the contract at which all the individual members order to escape the chaos of the state of nature, which is the war of all against all, right? To escape anarchy, to escape the world of anyone can do whatever they want to anyone else they want, right? That's the problem. In nature, Hobbes argues that in nature, everyone's claim is equally valid to everyone else's claim. Everyone has the right to whatever they want. Like, I want your bike. In the state of nature, and everyone who wants your bike has a right to it. What determines that right? Everyone's right is equally valid. Everyone's right is equally just. The fact that you made it does not, or bought it, has no bearing on the right in nature, has no bearing on the right to the claim of another person to what they want. This is why the state of nature, that it is a war of all against all. Because how do you adjudicate the question of there's no natural judge, and everyone is their own judge? So therefore, this condition of the war of all, this leads to the war of all against all that we must escape from. And therefore, the body politic, the creation of it through the social contract, where the individuals all wishing to escape this situation, agree to create the state. And then, remember, and the state creates at the same time, it creates both state and society. The contract, where the individual members will to create a body where they will live together, and that will set up rules that determine what's yours, what's mine, what's yours. In other words, it establishes property. It establishes what can be done to you, cannot be done to you. Because why? You enter this for the sake of what? Security of yourself, your life, your person, your life, and your property, your goods, your work, your effort. So therefore, it is a tool. In other words, the modern conception of the state, in this sense, it is a human construct, a tool man uses in order to escape nature. Now, this is completely opposite of the classical view of the older tradition of the city or the political, as when it's the natural habitat for man. So therefore, the concept of the state emerges as an alternative, a radical alternative, a break from the classical form of the political. It assumes that it is completely human construct. It is purely instrumental. It is the first act of technology. Man's conquest of nature. Okay? It's the conquest of nature to improve the human condition. To do more than what nature can, to control nature. And therefore, this is why I made reference to this. Now, Weber's definition is interesting because it ties it to the question of violence, legitimate violence, in terms of what we're doing it. Now, this leads us to this week's. That we talked about this is that the modern form, and this is some point about this. This is something I wrote, and and I don't usually like doing this for a class on PowerPoint, but someone said I should put out PowerPoint because maybe the students might get benefit from it. This is something I wrote about the distinction of these two things. That the concept of the state as a political replacement for the older form was created and coined by Machiavelli. It's Machiavelli is the person who coins the word, as we understand it, state. The original word, the word in Italian is lo Stato. The Stato comes from the Latin status. Status meant literally just the status of a thing, the condition of a thing. It is how Machiavelli uses us to refer to an instrument of the prince in order as a new mode in order. A new mode, in other words, a new structuring and ordering of his body, of the community, of the civitas, of the political, of what he's ruling, in order to be more effective than it is a new mode in order to more effectively order his principality, his rule. Now, it could refer to a prince, but it also could refer to any ruler, be it a civic ruler or a princely ruler. In fact, one of the interesting things about the prince is why does he call the book The Prince? Why wouldn't he call the term? In fact, it's what's so interesting about One of the books I have you read, but I'm kind of saying maybe I might just say it's there for you to read. I won't spend as much time on it as I would like to, because honestly, I think this is one of the books that everyone should know well. The Prince is probably one of the best books in that everyone should know well. It's probably one of those little teeny books that it's deceptive, because it looks like a kind of a how-to rule guide for idiots, a TED Talk. It's a Renaissance TED Talk designed for princes who have not much time, men who have little time. In fact, that's his audience. He says this. I'm giving you everything I know about, not only about things that, you read the letter introducing the prince, where he says, I'm giving you, he's giving this as a gift to a prince, literally. This is a gift. And and others give princes wonderful things. He's going to give him all his knowledge of not only things past, the histories, what he's learned by books and knowledge of things, but his experience as a statesman, because for 10 years, 20 years of his life, he's been a practicing statesman of Europe. So he's giving in this little book everything he knows. And some people, well, doesn't he also write this book called The Discourses? Yes, he does. But the audience are a bunch of young men. What's the difference? And in there he says to them, I'm giving you everything I know also. So the difference is not that these books contain different wisdoms, one for princes and one for republicans, right? It's rather people who have a lot of time versus young men who have lots of time and do nothing but talk. Okay, let's not be sexist. Young people, right? A bunch of young people who sit around, do nothing but hang around, chat, go to coffee shops and or beer halls and just or whatever the current fad, chi bars or whatever, and talk to each other and talk about events, right? That's the discourses. Where the Prince is for people who are like basically they have no time at all. They're making money. They're doing things. They're busy men and women, busy actors. Okay. Now this is why the Prince. It is the concept of the state. In other words, one of the things we're doing in this course is understanding concepts. Scientific phenomena is we always have to understand. We must understand that when we evaluate phenomena, we're always operating at two levels, at an observational level, but also at a conceptual level. Therefore, the concepts we use to kind of frame and theorize and to help us understand the observed and kind of get an explanation for why the phenomena behave, what the phenomena do, okay? So therefore, the concept of the state, the modern concept, is an attempt to understand and frame it of the human behavior. The state rests not upon the view that man is a social. Okay, I don't like the word social because this is. My friends who know me as scholars say, isn't the word social animal here? Aren't you just being sloppy? And they go, yes, I'm being sloppy. I'm using normal speak because the word social. It's the Greeks would argue, if you're talking about the ancients, the word is political animal. Okay? The word social doesn't exist in the ancient world. The word social is a modern concept. The political exists in the Greek world, in the Roman world. Ta politico. But the closest you get in social is societas or soci, which are the relations of people who are in societas, right? This would be the soci are those who are in societas is a contractual or agreed relation between parties. It is the word the Latins used from Latin to refer to business relationships and contracts or agreements between parties, and which also means the cities or tribes, right? So therefore, this is a problem. What is this? The social is a very modern concept. So it's kind of wrong to say that. Yes, by the way, it's correct to say that the state is not understood as a social animal, man as a political or social animal, but that viewed as man as a selfish and willful being that seeks what he desires and will do all he can to get it. Man is an individual. Now, man means not men as man. Okay. Let's not destroy the English language with stupidity of political correctness. And man in English means both. There's two definitions of the word man. Man as the masculine, but also man as human being. In the Greek, there's two words. There's ando and anthropos. English does not have that distinction. Okay? The Greek has two different words. The Latin doesn't. They get homini, but that just means the humans. But that does not work. Whereas ander from the Greek also transfers into what do you call ver. I'm trying to remember my declension. So actually, the problem is there's like 4 different words for men in Latin, 4 different possible words of male for Latin, but not the equivalent of the Greek, where there's one for the two distinctive, one for the individual masculine versus that. In English, English is a weird thing because it's a combination. It's Anglo-Saxon. In fact, man is one of those ugly Anglo-Saxonisms. You know English. You can always see, an English word. You know how what's a true English word versus what is a Latinate, because that's coming over from the Romans or the French Normans. Okay, the Latinates, the Anglo-Saxon words versus the Latinates. Okay, you can know how. Well, fornicate versus fuck. What is what? If a word has the latter is, if it's vulgar or brutal, it's Anglo-Saxon. Go look at all the ugly words about things and then look at the Latinate. The Latinate was what polite people would say, educated polite people. The more coarse and vulgar people would say the vulgar word, but the vulgar word is the Anglo-Saxon. It's the original English, the original origin word. So you can always see this double-sidedness in this. Man, thus, is an individual, a single being that may, if he wants, join with others, and if he may stay alone. His selfish nature leads to conflict with others over goods. The goods they mutually want or think they belong to them and them alone. This conflict creates a condition, I was reading right from here, which none are safe. And from the desire to be safe, they join together to protect themselves. Now, isn't this what I said earlier about that discussion about this? This is the point. What I'm now highlighting here is why the state is a tool, a mere human creation, a creation of the human will by which they secure their safety from those who seek to harm it. Thus, the state is understood to be an instrument men use to secure their peace and security, as well as other things that they individually are unable to secure. In other words, you yourself as an individual by yourself are unable to secure it, but this is the idea of collective action, right? That sometimes individually you're not able to achieve something, but collectively you are able to. Individually, you're not able to enjoy or preserve the good safety of your safety and your well-being, but in this collective entity, you're able to secure your well-being and security and your safety. The state is a voluntary association, thus in this view, in that men consent to join it. Yet it is an artificial association created for the sole reason to get that security that man by his selfish nature is unable to obtain by their private or individual action. You understand? This is the problem. The nature of the human organism is like most organisms, selfish, self-seeking, self-interested. But then you're going to say, but how do you get? Where does our desire for community come in? This is why I would always welcome you to read a book by Robert Axelrod called The Evolution of Cooperation, which argues that it is the reason that there's no contradiction to argue that men will join together for mutual benefit, and men being selfish, or human beings being selfish actors. It is merely an extension of their selfishness that community will emerge. And even self-sacrifice will occur. Self-sacrifice and care for others is a product of mutual self-interest, of not only individual self-interest, but remember, you become a kin group and a group identity, and that group has a kin group section therefore has a group interest. And therefore, as a member of the group, you wish to seek that group's survival, be it of your family, your extended kin group, or therefore the extension of that, your country, which is another extension of your kin group. Your country is as much a part, an aspect of who you are as your parents are. It's just an extension of this structure. Okay, remember that. It's the extension of our kin, our common kin or associational relation. In the state is a product of human making, or more correctly, of human willing. It is limited only by the capacity of the human will. You understand that? Because it's a product of our willing. Remember, it's created by the consensual contract of the members to create it. It's a product of will. And because it's a product of will and consent, it is therefore only limited by the degree of consent and limit of the human will. And the human will technically has no limit. Why? Because we can will what we have. We're not only the human will is not determined, is not a thing determined by mere nature. This is why the famous argument of Kant and other people would argue that that you cannot use nature to determine human action, because human beings are beyond the scope of what nature commands. The laws of nature are deterministic. Right? Like the law of gravity, right? If I drop this is going to fall, right? Certain things there's no control. Things that have no choice, no action, no will. But human beings have will, and because they have will, they have freedom. They're free from nature, Kant argues. And because of that freedom, will is thus indeterminate. Unlimited. And Hobbes would even say this, interestingly, that men are able to create, man's intellect or mind is not merely limited by nature. Man's intellect is also shaped by man's imagination. Hello there, hi there, sleepy.
Sorry.
I know, don't worry, I'll just wake you up just because I know it's tiring, it's late, maybe you had too much outside. Everyone can be tired. That the imagination, the human imagination can create things and goals, that therefore our will and our ability to will something into being. Can you make a circle a square? Can you put a square in a circle? Yeah, force, violence. In other words, you can use violence to make things. You can turn a man into a woman and a woman to a man to some degree. You can use violence to do it. you can violate the law, the natural order in that sense. It can be done. Human will is boundless by our ability to conquer and violate nature. Therefore, it's an act of violence and force. Therefore, the will is limitless at this. This is the Promethean. This is the Promethean urge. This is the urge of the idea of that we are gods, that we can do what we want and we can thus get away with what we want. This is the problem. There's a hubris here. The Greek world understood what hubris brings. Hubris brings the gods, either the gods or the divine or nature will punish us. There's a consequence for hubris. And therefore we have to understand the idea of the modern project. The modern project is the attempt of the human that he has absolute control over everything. Thus, what's wrong? What the human will, the human state? It's not bound. It is simply bound up by our ability to what? Get agreement. Will. But there's a problem with that. The cliche goes, the human will is only limited by its imagination and its desire. Thus, the state has no inherent limit imposed upon it, unlike the polis. The city. The Asian city had limits. Nature gave it a limit. Men had limits. And if you exceeded those limits, there were negative, dire consequences. It would fall apart. Whereas the polis was natural in that it was a natural environment which humans fulfilled their political natures. The state is a product of human willing, is not natural, but a product of human desire, human wants, and wanting, human wants and wanting, and the human will. And that is not limited by nature, only man's will. There is not a problem with size that occurs with the polis, therefore, it's not a question of size. It's a question of will and the agreement of the willing parties. And thus the state is more like an empire than a tribe, where the polis is more like a tribe than the empire. Back to the concepts, right? The concept. But even though the problem with empire, the empire is almost always homogeneous. Right? Empire is always heterogeneous. Heterogeneous, diverse, right? And a state cannot be. Can anyone guess why a state cannot be diverse? It must be homogeneous. Let's see if you can guess why. What did we just say the state is a product of?
The state is a product of human.
Human what? Human what?
Human unity.
Well, not unity. It forms, but what makes the unity possible?
Human's will.
What?
Human's will.
Human will, right? The will. Okay. Look at the will. What is the will? Is it a unitary construct or a heterogeneous construct, a diverse construct? In the human actor, is the will a unitary structure or a diverse structure? It's a unitary structure. The logic of it is the will is a unitary structure. Otherwise, if the will is disunified, what happens to the will? Would you be able, if the will was disunited, would the will be able to successfully act? No. This is what we call, it is the idea of a person with multi-personality disorder, right? It would be the equivalent of someone being schizophrenic, unable to have a unitary. The nature of a willing entity is unitariness. The ancient world doesn't require the unity that the modern state does. Based on will, there is no, in other words, once you agree, there can be no dissent on the fundamental questions. If you have dissent on the fundamental questions, then everything falls apart. You revert back to the state of nature. Once you've agreed, once you've formed the agreement and you've made the rules and you're bound by it, the second you say, I think it's wrong, well, you're outside the state of nature. You're outside of the social order, the social compact. A criminal, when he commits a crime, he is no longer, by his act of breaking the law, is no longer inside the state of civil society, inside the state, and the logic goes. This is why you use, he's in the state of nature. He's at war with you. He or she is at war with you. In other words, that's the problem with the state theory. The state theory will have a consequence to it. It will be violence. It will emphasize what Weber says is the conception of violence. This is like, again, this is the terms, what is the state, concept of the state? The state, there's certain things. We use the same words, state, nation, regime, and government. These are some of the words we'll hear. Weber defines it as a state as organization has a monopoly use of violence over a territory, right? It must have sovereignty, which has the ability to carry out its actions or policies within a territory. Sovereignty requires power, physical and otherwise, to defend against those other actors. In other words, the sovereign must protect and defend those that are in his community. Otherwise, the promise that holds everything together is broken. His obligation is to provide security and safety to those who are that is in the contract, that is in the state, against those who are outside of the state. Be they other states or be they individuals who seek to harm others that they're protected. Anyone who seeks to harm or violate the laws to protect others put themselves outside of the state. Now, the idea is one of the things that you give up when you join society is your right to use violence. You can use some violence to protect yourself, but you cannot use violence to secure what you want. You can defend your life, maybe even your property, because the idea of property and life is connected to each other. But to what degree do you have the right to use violence to get what you want? No, you've surrendered that. You can only use the law to get what you want. Law replaces force in the state, in the realm of state and society. Thus, therefore, institutions are what we call actors, which carry out, the institutions are what we call the actors which carry out the state responsibility. The institutions of the state are going to be the various actors, the representative agents. Representative agents or actors. The state is going to create agents. So, therefore, the king, in the modern concept of see, this is the big problem. Everyone says, well, the sovereign means the king, and this what Hobbes means by the sovereign here is he's divine right of kings argument. Nonsense. The king is not the state. The king is merely the representative agent acting on behalf of the state, who is executing the sovereign power on behalf of the body politic or the state. The king is no longer the ancient order. The feudal order was the king. The crown was the body politic. The crown was the form of this is the medieval concept of the king or the crown, was that it had two things. This is the king's two bodies, right? The king's body of the personal body of the king and his territory. This is again from Christian metaphysics, the metaphysics of Christ. Christ is both the wafer and the blood wine as well he is the body, the actual person of Christ, right? Christ is, in the Bible, there's all this, the New Testament, there's all this reference to the dual metaphor of Christ, that he's the vine, he is the church. In other words, there's the multiple bodies of Christ's bodies in this sense. Now this idea of the multiple bodies was brought in through Christian theory to the law to explain the connection between the king and his subjects, the king and his territory. The king. In fact, this is Old Testament even. If you go look at it's not only Christian, it's also Old Testament. Particularly the book of, look at the discussion of the king in Samuel, right? The purpose of the king is like the shepherd, right? The shepherd is therefore not only the person of the king, he is also shepherd and guardian. He is a guardian of the flock that God has given him to protect, right? He is that's what the idea of and this is why the Christ as king, priest metaphor that the New Testament and Christian theology reads goes back to the Old Testament discussion in not only in Samuel but also in Deuteronomy. Okay, this is the whole idea. Why is this important? Because this helps us to understand this earlier concept of monarchy that was before, which understood the king. Remember, we have to understand the ancient world. The ancient world, kingship is not political. Kingship, political rule and kingly rule are two different things. In fact, Machiavelli even agrees with this. Why doesn't he call his book Rex? Why does he choose the word prince? You know where the word prince comes from? Anyone? Come on, where does the word prince come from?
From Roman princeps?
Yeah, what is that? Who created it? Who coined it?
I don't know.
It's coined by Augustus, Octavius and Augustus, to claim what he was. Because he was sick of dictator for life. Because he was dictator, he was consul. In fact, he was both consuls. He was elected for both. He held all the ruling offices. He was consul. He was elected both consuls. He was dictator. He was also censor. He held all the offices, and he was getting sick of it. And the term emperor doesn't exist. The emperor just means the holder of power. And anyone, in fact, actually meant the father and a father over his children in Roman conceptions of paternal power held imperium. That's what it meant. Imperium meant the power of life and death. That's all it meant. So the emperor was not really a term of office. It became one later, after Caesar's. And Caesar is just a name, a family name, a man, right? A family name. So he needed a term, princeps. What is that? First citizen. And therefore, see, you have to understand Octavian Augustus's Rome. He didn't want to die like. Okay, how much time we have? We have about what? How much minutes we have? About. We leave class in about 4 hours. We have about 30 minutes, right? How much of you know about Roman history? Come on. Was Rome always a republic in its history?
No.
It was a monarchy. Why did the monarchy become a republic? Do anyone knows?
Like the last king was overthrown and...
Why was he overthrown? What did his son do?
Like he was very pride?
Well, yeah, very prideful king, a very prideful son. The famous story is the rape of Lucretia. He rapes the wife of one of his friends, a leading military, one of the leaders of the king's army. Okay, and she commits suicide right in front of all the citizens. And Brutus, who is not Brutus, the first Brutus is basically a clown. Everyone thinks he's a clown, but he's not a fool. He's very a wise man who understood that if he showed his excellence, he'd be killed by the king. Okay? So what does he do? He takes the bloody knife. She creates a spectacle. Her public suicide on this, right in the front of her house, in front of the marketplace, creates a scene where everyone is. She explains why she commits suicide, and everyone tries to convince her that, oh no, it's not your fault. It's Tarquin's fault. He raped you, and I'm not going to be used as an excuse for adulterous women. And she stabs herself bloodily. And then what does Brutus does? He takes the bloody knife up and raises it and says, "Let's all make an oath never to first get rid of the king and his son, and an oath that no Roman will ever be ruled by a king again. And anyone who wants to be king or desires to give Rome a king shall be killed." This is an oath everyone takes. An oath to the gods. The power of that oath. This is a taboo, the Roman taboo. Anyone who is wants to be king or that, everyone has a right to kill them. So when Julius Caesar, I don't want to be king. I don't want to be king. I don't want to be king. See, after that, king had a taboo status. Rex is more like tyrannos. Remember, if you know your Greek tragedy, the famous tragedy is Oedipus Tyrannus, right? Oedipus the tyrant, right? Well, in Latin it's called Oedipus Rex. Oedipus the king. But the translation is not basileus. Basileus in the Greek is friendly. It has no immediate connotation with tyrannos. In fact, it's the opposite. Tyrannus is the opposite. A king is lawful, always lawful. A tyrant is always unlawful. Okay, right? The idea of a king is both lawful and unlawful. The king is like the father, and like the father has unlimited power over life and death. Thus, you wanted to limit the sphere of the paternal imperial power. That's what the res publica was. Res public means res publica. Res means thing, the public thing. The public thing. This is the public order. So therefore, the political realm and the monarchical realm are two different spheres. This is why Machiavelli chooses prince. He uses prince, because prince is a political term. Rex is not. Therefore, Machiavelli recognizes and accepts the classical order, even while rebelling against it. This leads us to the problem of nation. We talked about nation before. Nation is tied to tribes, right? Political group bound together who share their political inspiration, i.e. self-government. There's two understandings of nation. The older understanding of nation is ethnic, racially, constructed by a people, right? But the modern understanding of nation is like a state. It is a voluntary construct. A people becomes a voluntary construct in the modern realm. What makes a people a people? We want to be a people. Okay? See the problem? The modern conception of the social and the political is completely voluntaristic. Can you see the problem with that, anyone? I don't know anyone here who voluntarily chose to be born, do you? That we voluntarily chose one nation or to be born in one family, one nation, one population. We don't have much choice in a lot of things. So that's the problem with the modern state. The modern concept is wholly voluntaristic, but the reality is not. So there's a problem between the conceptual idea versus the reality of the thing we're dealing with. The ancient world's problem was it was more consistent with the double nature of man, both the voluntary and involuntary. But the problem with the ancient world was it did not think it was possible to have large-scale organizations. It denied that large-scale organizations could be free or political. They would always have to be despotic or violent. Now the term is regime. This is the next one. Regime is one of these words that are going to be problematic. We'll talk about it because why? Fundamental rules or norms that can be changed gradually through trauma. or revolution. Next is government, which is the leadership presently entrusted of ruling of a state. So the government is simply whatever the group of rulers. Who is now ruling us? That's the government. The regime is merely the fundamental orders or norms, the structure. So therefore the state and the nation seem to be synonymous concepts, but the regime is what? It is the ordering of which that nation or that state has, in terms of how it's bound together, in other words, its norms, its rules. And the government is merely the leadership. Now, I'm going to skip the prince, because the prince is, we talked about it, the coinage of the term of that. It talks about the famous line of the prince. I talked about this indirectly here. Now, the nation, this is the problem. We have two conceptions of nation. The ethnic nation and the civic nation. The ethnic nation is what? This is basically the extension of a tribe, or the people, who share what? It's much larger, often a vast area geography. Its initial, most naturally forming variety of the nation as a common population, homogeneous in makeup, where its members of it share a common race, ethnicity, and other factors, like language, common religions, common customs, mores, etc. Historically, nations were not viably politically before the rise of the modern concept of the state. Okay, they weren't politically. They existed, but normally they exist either through a form of clan-based feudal structures of family kin group relationships, or through coercion of a tribe leader or a family leader. But with the modern state, it could have political. The nation could have, the state could provide a political form to the nation. The civic nation, this form of nation, has civic identity that has the bond that holds its members together. The civic identity shapes what the nation is, not the ethnic or racial makeup of the people who make it up. It is a political, therefore it is like a political community that manifests itself within a territory of a larger area than that of the polis or the civitas or the city, right? Therefore, this civic idea of nation is like the political nation of the city, civitas, but on a national level. Now, this is problematic. The civic nation emerges after the rise of the state as a political form. The civic nature can have either a homogeneous or heterogeneous makeup. But the problem here is this. What happens? This is something an American scholar, Bernard Yack, in the late 1990s got into. We had a big argument in the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s in American political science about the question of civic. Is there a real difference between an ethnic nation and civic nation? And Bernard Yack argued that, I'm sorry, in reality, over time, yes, at the beginning there's a difference between a civic nation and a heterogeneous civic nation at the beginning is going to be heterogeneous. Yes. Maybe at the beginning. But what happens within after several generations, what will happen? And a people will form. They will intermarry, interbreed, interconnect, and a new nation, ethnicity emerges. So in reality, yes, at the origins it may be that there's a difference, but over time, a civic nation becomes identical with an ethnic nation. In other words, what will happen is the intermarriage, the interconnectivity, and connection over multiple generations. What will produce? It will produce a people. Also, it will also things like language deviation. Come on, the famous joke about America. England and America are two nations separated by common language, right? They may share. We may share the same language, but our cultures are different. So different that are you still really the same ethnicity? You understand? How a civic entity. Remember, this is the other thing. Thing of Rome. Rome was not a homogeneous structure. Rome itself was a city of vagabonds. Romulus got strangers and stragglers from all the different parts of tribes. And what they took, did they even use their own language? No, because the language of the ruling family was the Tarquins. It was the Tarquins and the probably Etruscan. Etruscan probably comes from, it is probably a leftover from Trojan language. This is the metaphor. The Etruscans were really the original Trojans exiled. This is how sometimes the mythology says it, but also sometimes linguistics aspect of it says it likewise. Etruscan evolved and it became, but Latin and Etruscan interverged and it became very much modern Italian. And modern Italian owes as much to modern Etruscan than modern Latin. Okay? It's vulgarized Latin with Etruscan. So what do we say here? This is a very interesting problem here. Nations emerge. Like Rome was a heterogeneous origins of strangers who become unified and become Romans. Rome was a civic entity that becomes an ethnicity, a people, and then an ethnicity. Athens, likewise. Athens was basically the legends of the children of Athena. And the first king, Tiresias, oh, come on, what's the first king? I'm trying to remember. The one who goes and goes to the island to save the girl. Oh, come on, that's kind of driving me crazy. Who then rescues the first king of Athens. The Greek, Athens doesn't keep his kingship. The first king of Athens kind of creates a monarchy, a city, and then kind of goes away. And what happens is the legend has it then Athena creates the first Athenians. Okay, it's the name after Athena. Apparently, the god of the underworld wants to rape Athena, and ejaculates on her and the semen, instead of impregnating Athena, falls to the earth, and all of a sudden, human beings come up. And Athena feels sorry for these little human beings and makes them a city for them. That's the mythological origins of Athens, right? Is not a real. It is both Athens and these two great cities of history are what? Constructs of vagabonds and strangers, not a common ethnicity. But Europe, the European model, does be. The European modern form is the rise of the nation state, right? The Western European model is the national entity, the racial model. Here's the problem about this. This is the big bugbear. Oh, headache. Modern Europe comes. Okay. The first post-colonial world is Europe. Oh? See, you know this thing called Rome? It conquered everyone. All these poor little Celtic people, Gauls and Germanic peoples, all these rusty Romans conquered them, enslaved the Iberians, Greeks, took them over, made them under an empire. Everything was under this, and what happens? All of a sudden, oops. The Romans no longer. Romans don't want to go to the frontier anymore, because if you get sent to the frontier, what's going to happen? You're going to spend your whole life there. You're never going to come back home. So basically, a senior military post into for the poorest Roman subjects who join the army, this is great, because they get to go off and get rob, loot, take money, get rich, and get paid land over there, and they all of a sudden have something they never get back in Rome. But if you're a part of the Roman ruling elite, by the time of the 3rd century AD, 4th century AD, is it any good to go? Is it going to do you any? Are you really want to go to be sent to be a proconsul to Rome or Greece, or to Greece you can get back, but to the German Saxon lands, to this Germania, or to Britain, or Iberia, or Persia, not Persia, but Jerusalem. It's basically bye-bye, you're there for the rest of your life. You ain't coming back. And if by the way, if you piss off the new Caesar, he might kill you. So what happens? Well, all of a sudden the slaves take over. The empire is basically run by the slave. But basically even at the time of, starting with Augustus, the slaves were kind of in charge of a lot. But by the time of Constantine. By the time of Constantine, you got what? You got the slaves running everything. The slaves are in charge. And what happens? The barbarians get turned into Roman soldiers and Roman citizens. So therefore, instead of recruiting Romans to go fight and take positions, they start promoting Germanic barbarians to be the rulers. In fact, who guards the emperors, even the time of the Caesars? The Germans. The Praetorian Guard is mostly German soldiers because the later Caesars didn't trust the Roman elites and trusted the barbarians more. And the barbarians treated Caesar as God. The German soldiers treated the Caesars as divine. So therefore, this is what shapes the nature. So therefore, what is this? This post-colonial world of... I don't like doing that, but teachers. The post-colonial world of the collapsing empire. An empire collapses. And what replaces it? The tribal reality of what the German tribes, the various tribal entities come in there. And what happens is the barbarians come and sack the rich, wealthy Romans. Whole bunch of German tribes, then the Huns, and then the Muslims. 600? Everything starts in the 600s. This guy named Muhammad gets a revelation, and then within 100 years, Islam sweeps away all of Rome's control of the North Africa, and this is wiped out. Okay, and what's at the same time as the Germans completely took over. By 600, 700, Roman control over. Remember, Constantine moves the empire's capital from Rome to Constantinople. He moves it eastward. And by doing this, it basically condemns the organizational control of the West once the German barbarians hit, and the other barbarians hit. And when the Huns come in and occupy the area between, which we call, that area between northern Italy and Greece, Yugoslavia, around that area, right? Northern Yugoslavia, Trieste of the northern Adriatic. It cuts off completely the Roman land control over this, only sea-based control. And by this time, the Islamic pirates are controlling the Mediterranean. So what happens? Complete breakdown of empire. What reasserts itself? Voluntary tribal rulers. The emergence of households and states, the aristocratic order, the feudal order. That the continental European order post-empire, starting around 700, 800 in Western Europe, what happened was everything in collapse. And what remains of the Roman Empire? What is the only institution that survives the Roman Empire in the West?
The title of the emperor?
No, the title of the emperor, but what else?
The papacy.
The church.
The church.
And remember, the Pope was only Bishop of Rome, nothing more. It was five patriarchs. And the early Christian church under the emperor, remember, Constantine made the church an official religion. So the church was nothing more than an arm of the empire. Caesaropapism. Caesar is the head of the church, and the five patriarchs, which Rome was one, the only Western one, survived. And therefore, yes, it was the only institution. The church, the priesthood, was the only last remaining imperial institution. It was the only artifact left. And what happened? The tribal leaders decided to use the empire. What does the empire have? Law, rules, language. So the surviving tribe, the new emerging tribal leaders and political and rulers, or claims to rulers, will what? They will appeal to these documents in Latin, justifying their ownership of things, and claims to be rulers. And who do they turn to legitimate their conception? The church, which is the only imperial institution. And they will appeal to Roman law to justify things. In other words, the Germans will conquer Rome, the Roman lands in the west, but then what they will do is they will either completely adopt, some of them, the ones who capture northern Italy and the ones who capture Spain and Portugal and southern France, they will completely adopt Roman laws and Roman customs. The northern French Germanic tribes conquering northern France, what they will do is they will adopt Roman law, but adapt it to German customs. Where the German tribes that were never Roman will be under German law, German customs. And this becomes the origins of the government, the legal structures. Now Montesquieu in the Spirit of the Laws, the last book, part 6 of Spirit of the Laws, explains this in detail, how this happens and why it happens. And this is what they're calling here. So what is surviving? What survives? What survives the collapse of the empire? Households and estates, right? What happened? When all of a sudden those barbarian hordes, like Vikings, German raiders, they want to steal everything that's movable at first. So what happens to the aristocratic lord? They ban the city. They go to their country estate. And what do? They fortify their country estate. They hire the cavalrymen who are fleeing. They hire private soldiers who will protect them. They offer them, "You work in I'll give you money or give you land, food access to protect me. Make a deal." All of a sudden, that's the whole thing. Everything is contractual relationships. The feudal contract. I have a house and an estate. You work for me, I'll protect you. You peasants, you work my land, you get to give me 20% of what you do. It's my land, you can work my land. You can keep 60, 70%, maybe even 80%, depends how good the land is. The landlord will get his share. Likewise, the church does the same thing. The church owns lands and things like this. And the church and these estates and these rulers, and remember, these rulers are also, these people are also part of a tribal connection, local tribal situations. So certain families and certain kin groups will assert loyalty, and certain family claims will emerge, and certain ones are going to be princes and kings, right? And then they're going to assert tribal loyalty. And therefore, they use the household. They interconnected households as a structure within the family of language kin structures. So therefore, the household and the estates, right? We did that, and I give you 4 examples up there, right? And then Roman law that survives, and what last? The Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church, Christian Church. These are the institutions. The structure, however, of this medieval nation world is highly decentralized. Until the idea of the new Roman Empire, that's the whole story about the creation of the Holy Roman Empire. Come on. Pippin, the Frankish king, the king of the Franks. I mean, come on, just look at France's name. France's name is telling. We call France France. It's not Gallia, Gallica, because the real French are the Gallics, right? What are the Franks? Germans. The Frank Reich. The Frankish kings, the Frankish rulers are the Germanic peoples. The Franks were a Germanic tribe who conquered and shaped France. Don't tell the French that their name shows that they're really products of Germany. That just will piss them off endlessly. Okay? So therefore, the nature of the European construct of the feudal world that we understand in modern Europe is structurally under this structure. Now, this feudal structure, the Holy Roman Empire was the Frankish king deciding to claim the dormant title of Roman Emperor in the West. Why? Oh, because of Diocletian divided the empire in 4 regions. There were 4 empires. And therefore, this dormant legal title was there. And the church discovered it. The churchmen say, hey, there's this title called Emperor in the West. That's dormant. Hey, Pippin, you want to give me money? What does he do? He liberates the poor Bishop of Rome, the Pope. Because right now, the Pope is nothing but a prisoner of the Roman barons. Each Roman family baron was controlling who makes the Pope. They kill one Pope and they'll make the other one make the new Pope. The Pope was nothing but a pawn of the Roman baronal princes. Okay, so what happens? Pippin comes there, kills the princes, gives them a whole bunch of land, and hey Pope, you're a prince now. The Papal States. By the way, can you make my son emperor? You can. Here's the proof. Churchmen, clerics, come here. That's what the word clerics, right? The clerics. Who are the only people who can read Latin? Churchmen. So therefore, they were usually any prince had lots of these churchmen helping him doing their laws and regulations and treaties that were all negotiated in Roman law and therefore Latin. Bad Latin, but still Latin. So, in our last few minutes, let's talk about one of the readings you'll look about is tied to Bobbitt. Bobbitt, in his history, that one of the readings that I have you have, and it's from Bobbitt's, it's a long history. He gives an evolution of the state. Bobbitt's history is, usually everyone talks about, Fukuyama. Fukuyama is at the end of history, right? That we start out with pre-states, no states, nation states, regional states, world states, right? This is the end of history hypothesis, right? This is the Kojevian Hegelian hypothesis. That there was no state, the creation of the state, then the nation state, then the regional state, and then the world state, right? This is the concept of the famous Fukuyama hypothesis. The global liberal state, the global liberal order. Yay! This is basically a vulgarization of the more Marxian concept of Kojev. Okay, now Bobbitt actually gives a logical order that really Fukuyama doesn't, never did. In fact, Fukuyama kind of abandons his 1991 hypothesis in his book. He kind of by the early 2000s, 2004, kind of abandons it in a sense. He doesn't think it's going to happen. He becomes kind of, the so-called, those of you who talk about this, you're talking about Huntington versus Fukuyama, right? Fukuyama believes liberal world order. Huntington believes the conflict of civilizations, right? Everyone talks about this, but I hate to say it, no, Fukuyama and Huntington are the same guy. They believe in the same exact thing. Huntington himself writes about the waves of democracy before Fukuyama does. Fukuyama just gets famous because of it. Huntington is already well known, but also not really liked. Okay, he will then challenge the clash of civilization hypothesis. Then in the early 2000s, at the 30th anniversary of Huntington's political order and changing societies, classic 1968 classic, Fukuyama re-releases it and gives an introduction, and then in 2012 and 16 does a 2-volume book on the front. So he becomes, ironically, Fukuyama becomes Huntington. But regardless, Bobbitt and we'll end here on this point. Bobbitt gives us an idea, a kind of shaping of the princely state, this history. Princely state, kingly state, territorial state, state-nation, nation-state, market state. Now, I will probably continue this going next week, probably, because we'll talk about this continuing here. So I probably will have to talk about this some more. So, okay, therefore, take care and have a good day. Bye-bye.